Hello and welcome to the Ahead of the Game podcast. I'm your host, James Oxford, and today I've got Chris Filer and Chris Gorman here with me to discuss which teams we think have had really good off seasons so far, almost a week into free agency. Now, before we kick it off, I'm going to ask you for a quick favor. If you could hit that like button, it would help the channel out a ton. And if you really like our content, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. Now, Chris Filer, I'll start with you. Who is a team you think has had a really good offseason in terms of getting to where they want to go long term?
Yeah, I think a good starting team to talk about this today is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have just begun so strong and taking such a talented team and only essentially losing Josh Giddey, which, losing in quotations, being able to add two real contributors in Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein is just huge. It's a huge win. Not only that, they were able to bring back Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins on really favorable deals. Overall, it's just a masterclass so far from Sam Presti to the offseason, and just adding real proven contributors to just a fantastic roster already in ways that could really help them. I mean, Caruso should be a full-time, practically starter minute kind of guy for the Thunder, a team that didn't need that. And Isaiah Hartenstein is going to add a dimension of size and uh, impact play that I think is really going to cover their weakness. Maybe the one weakness they had last playoffs. So it should be a fantastic couple additions, and I can't wait to see how they get started next season.
Yeah, one thing I thought was really kind of a steal of the offseason for them, they were kind of recent moves, is they just did two re-signings. They got Isaiah Joe back, I think at a really reasonable number. And I haven't seen the actual contract numbers on that, but I think it's a descending contract. And the second name just escaped me on who they just got extended. If one of y'all could help me out
It's
there.
Aaron Wiggins. It's Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins. So
That's
four
right.
for 48 for Isaiah Joe and 5 for 47 for Aaron Wiggins. Just like fantastic deals.
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking. I thought those were well below market. I think that you could have gone to probably 20 other teams in the league, and they probably would have been happy to give out that money, if not more. Gorman, where's your head as far as the Thunder go?
I echo Chris. I really think the Thunder, the long term is now wide open for them. I think the Hartenstein deal opens up the middle of the floor. And if they could get him the ball in short rolls and let him pass from that, I mean, they're going to have shooters surrounding him. He's going to open up the bench unit big time. And then he's going to put that size down for rebounding. They're definitely, capable of a number one seed. And I like the signings of Joe and Wiggins, as y'all said. I think that the way they developed it, everybody's talking about how they have so many pieces that they're not going to be able to keep together. I think this shows that, on role player minutes and role player usage, you can get these guys at, role player dollars. And, I think there's a lot of teams around the league that are paying attention to that and paying attention to how they're keeping that team building together.
Yeah, and the Hartenstein deal is so interesting because I believe with 30 years it is non-guaranteed or very limited partial guarantee. So when Jalen Williams and J Dub and Chet come up for their big contracts, they're going to be able to get off Hartenstein if they need to. So it's been quite a good job from Presti to really organize this for long term, like you said, Chris. And honestly, the Isaiah Joe contract 4 for 48 is crazy to me. He was so good. I think he's such an awesome piece for them, just having an absolute dead eye shooter roaming around. And I'm curious to see if Hartenstein coming in allows for Chet to play more power forward, which we really didn't see much from him this last year. And his best offensive attribute right this second is kind of just being a spot up guy, which is fine. I mean, like that's helpful. But he's maybe going to be a little more in position. And then you've got an incredible defensive size there with those two guys.
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to bring up next. Kind of that ability to play both Holmgren and Hartenstein together kind of gives them another dimension. It allows them to match up, let's say, with the Timberwolves if they decide to go with that big look again, or if the Nuggets decide to shift more in that direction after what the Timberwolves just did in the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see if they use that as kind of a counter. Now, obviously, Hartenstein, I think, is more of a stopgap if you want to do that. more of a long-term look. But he's nice as I think as a kind of, hey, we can spend a little bit of, not a little bit. He's a good contract, but we can spend money now to see if it works as kind of an experiment. Worst case scenario, it doesn't, and he's a backup center. And best case scenario, they find something resembling 90s basketball that works in the modern day.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely agree.
So, Gorman, who's the first team you'd like to talk about?
I'm going to go with the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't think a lot of people are talking enough about them. They can go in so many different directions here. I really like the Murray contract. Not enough gets talked about that he's making 24.5 this year, goes up to about 28. That's a great value contract to be able to add to something that you have here. Now, they can either keep BI and try to run it with that, see how it goes. But other than that, they have so much flexibility. If they want to move on, now they need a center. So I expect them to use BI to target some type of center around the league. I was actually surprised that they didn't, try to get something a little further in that Atlanta deal. Atlanta probably could have used BI and, had a little bit of a run with BI, and they could have swapped them with somebody like Capella, and they could have made it work financially. I was surprised that they didn't even at least look into that, because now they desperately need a center. They have no one after the Valanciunas signing in Washington. And I think that, with the package of picks they have 6 first rounders over the next 3 years, including the Lakers 25 unprotected next year, the Milwaukee 27 that's unprotected. And I mean, those are high valued picks, and along with all their own. And, they could package that along with BI and get something that could really value, what they're trying to do. I think that the CJ contract is, they're set up to try to make a run at it with CJ. But I think that his contract would be the only thing that's really hindering any of their future financial flexibility. They're under the first apron, which is huge nowadays. They can re-sign Trey Murphy, and they've kept him, as I said earlier, on role player minutes. So the guy's going to be able to, they're going to cut his contract down just a little bit, and they might need it. And they can still build with something. You got Zion's 24, BI's 26, CJ's 32. He's the only guy in the 30s. Murray's 27. Herb Jones is 25. Trey Murphy's 24. They have an extended window here, and I think they made a great deal going for Murray. Maybe, work with BI, see how he goes till the deadline. Otherwise, try to move on from him and move in a different angle. And you're not hurt cap-wise. You're wide open to make a future move, and I think that's important these days. Trade targets that I've been hearing a lot about would be a Robert Williams. He's from New Orleans, and they got so many centers in Portland right now. I think that they could use to get, they could use the picks right now, and I don't think Robert Williams getting any kind of playing time, and they wouldn't need him to get any major playing time. And Ayton, Willie Green has a little bit of history with him, and like I said before, I was surprised that they didn't do something with Atlanta on the Capella or Conwu moves. But for the most part, I really like where the Pelicans are headed, and that's why I chose to go with them first on my off-season good. And like I said, there's still a lot of time left in the off-season. We're kind of starting early here. And, they're a younger team. They can defend. They can really shoot it. Coming off the bench with Alvarado, Herb, and Hawkins, these guys can defend. They can shoot it. And there's a lot of flexibility there. I really like what New Orleans is doing, and I'm excited for what they're going to do in the future.
I was looking at the kind of table I made of players coming in and out of teams this offseason, and I was thinking to myself, no one's happier right now than Yves Missi. I think that's how you say his name. Looking at their depth chart, he's licking his chops right now, thinking, man, what's standing in between me and playing time? But I really like what you brought up about Robert Williams. I think if I'm the Trailblazers, personally, I'm trying to hold on to Robert instead of Ayton. I think Time Lord's a lot more valuable, although there's also the risk of injury concerns with Robert Williams, which is something I'm not sure the Pelicans are ready to tackle either. I do think it's interesting though. Um, while a lot of teams, it seems like, at least from where I'm standing, a lot of teams are reacting to what the Timberwolves did in the playoffs, going big, and they're looking for, ways to counter that. The Pelicans seem to be going in the exact opposite direction. And I'm kind of big on when you see other teams zigging, you shouldn't think, how can I zig? You should think, how can I zag? And maybe that's what the Pelicans are doing right now. Maybe they envision, and this is just me spitballing here, a future where Zion gets some center minutes and he just runs these big teams out of the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Ayton thing would be challenging. They'd have to figure out a way to put somebody like CJ in the deal. It'd start getting a little bit cap unfriendly there. So I think that's why Robert Williams is more of a want for them. I don't think they want to go long term with something like Ayton unless they are able to get off the CJ deal, or maybe BI.
Yeah, this is an interesting team because an issue they've had the last couple of years is they've almost had like too many guys to get minutes. And, we've been watching Trey Murphy come off the bench, and I mean, he's so good, but he hasn't really had the opportunity to get those starter minutes on a regular basis. And now you're right. I mean, if they could use Ingram to move off and get a good center, or get a center in some other way, you've still got potentially really deadly starting lineup with Zion, McCollum, Murray, Herb, and Trey Murphy. That's five guys, not including Brandon Ingram. So you have this huge potential asset. And you still are going to have Jordan Hawkins. You're still going to have Jose Alvarado coming off the bench and contributing. So they still have enough guys, and they can move Ingram to get, if that's the decision they end up going with, and still have enough depth to be a really dangerous team. So I'm curious to see what that move ends up being. I mean, we might end up having to talk about them again in a future podcast, but they're such a fun team, and it's got to be exciting for the Pelicans fans to see what this is going to turn into next, because these guys are still, you're right, it's still a young team outside of McCollum, just kind of finding its own. They're going to be a blast the next few years.
Yeah, and I think an easy transition to the next team that I'd like to talk about. We were talking about the Trailblazers there. I don't think they'd be interested in the CJ McCollum return at this point, given the current state of their depth chart. But maybe we can work out a three-team trade there, or maybe there's a different trade target for the Pelicans. But the Trailblazers are another team that I really like what they've done this offseason. Looking at their ins and outs, they got Denny from Washington for the 14th pick. I thought that was like a really good pickup if they're really wanting to build around Scoot, and I think Denny's a solid piece to do that. And then Klingon at number 7, he's just a straight up monster on defense. I have some concerns about how he does in space come playoff crunch time, but the Trailblazers are a long ways away from worrying about playoff crunch time minutes and deep playoff runs. So I do like what they've done this offseason. It's someone that I think that they didn't go above and beyond. Like, they didn't go way out of their way, spending a lot of assets to improve, but they went and got assets where they made sense in the draft and where they made sense in the trade market.
Yeah, this is a team, like you said, there's a lot of guys here. They're not worried about a playoff crunch yet. So really, it's so much potential talent on this squad. They can kind of just throw guys out this year and see who sticks. I mean, they've got some real players now. Ayton is a starting caliber center generally. Klingon is potentially a starting caliber center, maybe right out of the gate. Robert Williams, we all love him. He just needs to stay healthy. And so if they can get anything out of him, he's going to look really good. He's still on that fantastic contract where he's less than 10% of the cap the next couple of years. And you just want some talent around these young guys, because you need to see what can Scoot become, what can Shaedon Sharpe actually do. He's still only 21. And just seeing what these guys can turn into, putting some actual talent like Denny and these centers around these wings and guards, trying to figure out who they are. It's going to be a fact-finding mission this year, but again, a fun one. This is a team where they're doing what they have to do. They're the next step ahead of the other tanking teams. They're putting the real NBA players around the young guys to see who's going to stick. So they're a year ahead of the other tanking low-end teams.
I absolutely agree. And, I like the Simons contract. A lot of people were talking how bad it was to begin with, but now you're at 25-8. That's just Dylan Brooks makes that. I think they need to figure out what to do with Grant, I think, before he becomes a major expiring and people start believing that he's just a rental for 1 year. I think they want to use, somebody might like Grant to fit into that kind of Aaron Gordon role in Denver. Somebody that can defend. These wings that can defend and shoot it and maybe dribble a little bit are big time. That his contract is at 29. But, if a team makes a little bit of a leap, he would be somebody that could solidify somebody into the playoffs and make a little bit of a run. And I think that Portland should look heavy into, getting off of him somewhere before the deadline of next year, before the contract comes to an expiring. Yeah, but other than that, I love the Avia deal. I love the Avia signing or the trade that brought in Avia. He's going to be a big pickup for them. He'll get those guys situated, a little bit calmed down. I thought Brogdon would have done that for them last year, but he could never stay healthy. So I thought that, bringing in Avia and it still allows Scoot to be on ball really well, change a lot for them in the future. You're right. Big things coming out of Portland.
Agreed on that. Jeremy is still someone who could be an asset for sure. He's less than 20. He's going to be less than 20% of the cap by the end of this deal. And he's still a real contributor. And one thing that I'm thinking about on some of these guys is I'm not sure that Jeremy is quite as helpful for a young team trying to figure out who they are as like Denny TJ is, because he's more ball dominant and maybe less of a guy who fits around other players. He's less of I think maybe he's less of a scaling kind of player and more of a give me the ball, let me go try to put up numbers. And I don't know that you want that quite as much on a team like this who's trying to figure out what young guys can fit. It might be better to just not have the talent and have Denny come in and be more of a passer, a ball mover instead of a ball stopper that Jeremy is a little bit more. So agreed. Yeah, I think if they get off Jeremy, that'd be fantastic. But he can still probably help some good teams.
One thing I really like that they didn't do is they didn't rush the Scoot experiment. They let him have his struggles year one, and they didn't jump to conclusions and say, oh, let's go get another guard now to kind of hedge our bets on Scoot. They're putting their trust in him. They're surrounding him with talent that if he can succeed, this talent should allow him to succeed. Now, if he can't succeed because of other reasons, at least they can say they put their best foot forward as far as effort goes into putting a situation around him that allows him to flourish. And I still have confidence that he can do that. Am I a little bit less confident than I was a year ago? Probably a little bit, but some players take a little bit longer than others. So I like what they're doing as far as that goes.
Agreed.
Now, Filer, who is the next team that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, I want to say the Knicks. I'm excited for New York to go get OG back on their deal. That was always going to happen. You're not going to trade all this stuff for OG Anunoby. He comes in and is like a one-man top defense in the league and then lose him after 1 year. But it's good to get him back. And just adding Mikal Bridges. I'm pumped for them. I know it's a lot of picks. The Nets sold at the absolute apex of his value, so good for them. But the Knicks don't need the picks so much right now. They're going in. They're trying to win right now. We haven't had a repeat champion in years. It's up for grabs. And they were really competitive. I think before the 45 injuries they had in the playoffs, they really could have competed at the top of the East. And so adding Mikal, having that deadly wing duo and those two guys, having still Hart, Brunson, Randall didn't play in the playoffs. He has issues, but he's still a really good player. And they're going to have Mitchell Robinson back theoretically if he can stay healthy. The one thing you worry about is the center rotation because losing Hartenstein's a big deal. But we're going to see more Randall at center this year, I'm sure. And I'm not convinced that you couldn't play small with this squad. OG's a big dude. You probably could play a little smaller than other teams can because of the size of some of your wings. So I'm really excited, especially when Josh Hart averages like 12 rebounds per 36 or something. But it's a fun team. I'm really excited for them, and I don't mind that they gave up all the picks for these guys.
Yeah, I don't either. I completely agree. I mean, make the run at it and get the guy that they all want to. That team chemistry. And in New York, the way that it is, coming from Villanova, And, that was a lot of fun to watch. I think that's a big deal in today's NBA. They're always going to sell out the Garden, but having a team that's fun to watch and they're going to be entertaining and, pumped up and having the Garden riled up and, just adding Bridges to that mix where they already come in with chemistry. They can guard Boston now. That's going to be everybody's trying to guard Boston. That's what the big deal is in the East, what they're doing in Philly. And I think they made the biggest jump towards that I think they're going to be the biggest threat after Boston, as long as they can stay healthy. We know the injuries derailed them last year. But other than that, I mean, I don't see anything that really holds the Knicks back. They got the shooting. They do have the size. Mitchell Robinson is a good center. They really used Hartenstein last year in that short role, and he was doing a lot for them in the playoffs because he had to. But prior to that, he wasn't, and then when you get Randall back, he'll provide a lot more of the offensive punch that they were missing. I think just being healthy and adding Bridges puts them at the top of the list to challenge Boston in the East for sure.
One thing I really want to push on, or not push on, agree with what you said was it was fun. So growing up, I hated the Knicks. I'm going to be honest. I was a Knicks hater. I think a lot of people in the country probably can say that. But man, I wanted to come in and not like this team, but it's impossible to not like this Knicks team, which is crazy. Like, if you would have told me 5 years ago that, man, you're going to really like this Knicks team, I'm like, dude, you're crazy. But nah, this Knicks team is fun to watch, and now they're legitimately deep, which is a problem that even if Tibbs has. I don't know if Tibbs knows how to deal with that problem, given his normal rotations. So we'll see how he does with that. But man, I am excited to see what they do this year. And I don't think I've ever said that about the Knicks. Now, saying that, I will say that given how I know New Yorkers like to bet, hammer the under on the over-under preseason. Hammer that under hard because the Knicks fans are going to be hammering the over.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that, being in the Garden like it is, I mean, how much pressure is on New York? Last year that was really coming in, they really, the season prior wasn't so great. So the expectations kind of jumped on them in the playoffs. And this year it's going to be a different story. They talk about that pressure in Philly, and I think it's the same for New York. Do I think they can handle it? Yes, because they've been playoff tested other than Bridges. But I think that the pressure is on now in New York, and I don't think enough can be said about that pressure, especially in somewhere like New York. And would be doing a disservice if we don't say something about New York City and grit. That team is gritty. I think we need to at least mention it because that's one of the grittiest teams in basketball, and they're going to get in your face and they're going to defend you and they're going to frustrate you. And I think with Tibbs coaching them, man, that's a dangerous team in the playoffs. And I agree with you on the under. I don't think they're going to play for the regular season. I don't think they're an 82 game team, as Draymond calls them. I think they're playing for the playoffs this year, and I think you'll see them kind of playing non-back-to-backs with Brunson. I think they're going to try to keep these guys healthy because they're deep enough to do it. They just need to stay healthy. I mean, that's the biggest thing that will keep them out.
Now, that would be a big change for a Tibbs team to not play for the regular season. I will point that out. I think he's kind of notorious, like when he was with the Bulls, where they were one of the only teams that kind of didn't see like a elevation in their play when they got to the playoffs because they were already playing at 110% the entire regular season, which obviously wears on some guys. One draft pickup I really liked for them was Tyler Kolek. I think he's a point guard that can really get guys like where they need to be, and people legitimately like playing with him. And he's just going to fit in that backup point guard role like really well. Maybe not this year, but I think down the line. Now, if it's this year, that's awesome too. He is someone that I think could be ready to play rather early, but he's a nice pickup for them that I really liked.
Kolek and McCullough. That's a good point, James. Kolek and McCullough are both guys who potentially could contribute early. They're both kind of the NBA ready kind of prospects, and just really interesting. Whatever happened with Kolek, I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes, but for him to, we had him, in the first round. Like a lot of people had him in the first round. So it's an interesting pickup down the board here, and him and McCullough could potentially come in and be helpful right away. So that's a good point.
Now, Gorman, who's the next team that you'd like to discuss in this episode?
Okay, y'all ready? I'm going to shock the world here. The Los Angeles Clippers.
Whoa.
Yes. The reason I'm doing this and I'm going with them is because they're catching a lot of flack for not signing Paul George, obviously. But they were going to be doomed if they did. You know, this is the poster child of the new CBA second apron. This is what they were. This is the team they were trying to break up when they made the new CBA. And they did a good job. That new second apron is too scary for a lot of teams. You see it with Denver. You see it with all these role players going down or going to other teams. The Clippers put themselves in a position to somewhat contend this year. They signed a bunch of wings with a Derek Jones Jr., got Batum back. They have Tucker, Mann, and then we got to figure out what's going to happen with Westbrook. But that seems to be more of a recipe to win these days than the big three. I haven't seen a big three work out recently, and especially with this new CBA, I don't see it working in the long run. Now, I'm gonna bring up something for y'all's thought, and y'all tell me what you think. Have they switched places with the 76ers from last year? Because they have a ton of cap space, and they're a team that people want to go to. It's not like they're not the Washington Wizards. They're not the Portland Trailblazers. They're not the Utah Jazz. They can recruit. They have Harden. They have Kawhi. They tried to working Kawhi to death last year, and it didn't work in the playoffs. So I think this year they'll take a little bit of a slower approach with Kawhi. And I think that they might be a playoff contender. I'm not saying that they're a title contender, but they'll be able to go into the new building, probably get into the playoffs, make a little bit of money, and then they'll be able to show up in 25 and 26 with Kawhi, Harden, and Norman Powell on their contracts, on their books. That's it. And they'll have to make a decision on Mann, but they'll have flush with cap space, and they'll be able to sign somebody. And I think that the alternative to signing Paul George is a win because they're still in it. They're still in it. And I don't see why, everybody wants to talk about how they lose him and then now they're just going to be a bottom team. No, they're not going to be a bottom team. A lateral move in the West this year might be a pretty good deal because with all the teams in the West all the players in the West switching, I think that moving on from Paul George was actually the right move. They hired Van Gundy, and I think he'll help the defense. I think they'll be a lot tougher this year, and I think that a Harden Kawhi mix could work a little bit better than the Paul George, Kawhi, and Harden mix. What do you guys think?
I agree with you as far as the big three versus two guys in a support role player combo. I think you're absolutely right. The big three is from an era that is no longer in the NBA. And unless you somehow turn your team into a big seven or something like the Celtics did, it's just not realistic to do something like that anymore. I do think you need to build around a team just around two guys, and that's absolutely right. I guess my only hang up on this is for this year and for next year. I don't know if Kawhi isn't playing like every game, which I don't think you can expect him to play. I don't know if this is a playoff team in the West. The West is crazy. So I guess I'm worried about that from an immediate perspective. And then you've got Kawhi who's 33 and Harden who's 35. Getting older all the time. And so I guess that's my hang up on this. But I think you're right in that what else are they going to do? Would run it back again for the exact same thing again for 4 years? Why would we think it's going to be different now that these guys are all way older than they were at the beginning?
Exactly.
And they're all broken down. So I agree with that. So I get what you're saying, and yeah, I think that makes sense. It's just like shocking to think about because I'm looking at this roster going, man, I don't know if it's a playoff team, but that might be just what they needed. I don't know.
Right. And I think I'll push back with your pushback and saying that, yeah, as far as being a playoff team and worrying about the age, well, you're still worrying about that with Paul George.
Yeah.
And now you've got an extra contract that's going to push you into the second apron. You won't be able to do anything. Their picks will get pushed all the way to 30th. There's just not much they're going to be able to do. They'd be in the gutter so fast. I mean, I think in 26, 27, they'd be pretty much in the gutter, and they got a new building, and they wouldn't, they'd be clawing back with a terrible, terrible. I mean, they don't have anything to work with as far as picks are concerned. The future isn't exactly exciting. And so I think if you made it even worse by adding that Paul George fourth year, I think you're really in the gutter. And I mean, they may not be a playoff team unless Harden stays healthy and does it's the system thing. But they did a decent job last year with Harden and Paul George when Kawhi went out. And, Kawhi's a better player than Paul George is. And like I said, are they the new 76ers? Because Maxey and Embiid didn't look terrible last year. And they were surrounded with a lot of the same guys, with the Batum and such. So, I mean, and they can still add to this. There'll be an open market with some of these young guys. We'll see what they do with Norman Powell's contract and Terrence Mann. But, I mean, for the most part, they're open at least. Now they're not locked down and looking at the second apron and trying to claw their way back in a new building. And it just doesn't look like a good future if they did sign Paul George. So I think I'd go with the alternative and be happy with that. Attempt to make the playoffs. As long as you keep a healthy Kawhi for most of it, you might be able to make a run at it.
Yeah, and you know what? Another thing is looking at this cap sheet. Some of these guys are still assets. I mean, if you don't want to pay Zubac a bunch of money, he's still an asset right now. You have Terrence Mann, same thing. They have this great Derek Jones contract. I mean, some of these guys are movable. They have the right size contracts to move. Yeah, I get it. I get the flexibility is an asset in itself that often gets overlooked in these kinds of conversations. So I totally understand.
A lot of people don't appreciate how you have to balance the let's fight for now versus let's maintain some flexibility in the future, like you're saying, Gorman. The second apron is super intimidating. I don't know if people are familiar with kind of the rules that have been put in with the second apron, but future picks get locked up. You can't take in more money than you're letting out in any trades. So the trades all have to be you taking in more money. I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, the other way around. The trades all have to be you letting go more money than you're taking in, which is tough because before we had, that little margin for error, I think it was 10% or so that you could be within for most of the trades. That margin's gone for the second apron teams. So it is really difficult for teams to navigate. Do we want to be a second apron team? I think most teams are going to figure out they don't want to be. And that can kind of walk us into the next team that I want to talk about, the Phoenix Suns. Have a very large salary going forward, and I'm hoping it's something that my Rockets can take advantage of in the trade market. I don't know that will happen. That'd be great if it did. But yeah, the Suns are a team that I really liked what they did, especially in the draft. They went out and got two kind of role players. Like these guys are going to be role players, I think, but they're very useful utility role players in Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro. Both of them, I think, are just fantastic pickups in terms of what they have on the roster now and how it fits next to what they need. Now, did they need maybe another point guard also? Yes, but I don't think that was on the board for them, unless you want to say Kolek, who I'm a little bit confused I didn't go up and get because I thought he would have been a great fit for them. But they did grab Monty Morris in free agency, who I think is more of a second unit point guard who can be a really good, like, get my guys where they need a second unit. But it looks like from their depth chart currently, he's probably going to be their starter. But the Suns are a team that I think made a lot of steps in terms of, hey, this is what we have to work with right now. Now, can you critique their moves coming into this year? Absolutely. I think the Bradley Beal trade was a mistake that they're probably going to be paying for a while. But for what they did this offseason, I really like it. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Suns. And again, I get there in a difficult spot. But Filer, where's your head at as far as the Suns go?
Yeah, I agree. They're digging themselves out of the deepest grave. So they're making some progress. I was trying to just count, and they might have 8 NBA players on their roster now, so that's good, as opposed to the 4 or whatever they had last year. So it's progress. I like Iguodaro as someone who might be able to come in and immediately contribute sneakily, just off the bench against backups. Morris, you're right. Same thing with Plumlee. Morris and Plumlee are guys who can come in and contribute at an NBA level right away. And they're just kind of rounding out this team. Getting Royce O'Neal back on that contract is solid. And it's a slow grind, but you just got to get some real players around your big three again. It's hard to do that in the NBA at this point.
Yeah, I mean that kind of falls into my point. I mean, would you sign Beal today? If you were like the Clippers, it would be the same. They wouldn't do it. He would walk. Um, what do you think they do? What's the finale with Beal? Do you just trade him for peanuts? And if that's the case, I mean, why not do it? Just do it. Just get rid of it. Add something to it. If you got to add 5 second-round pick, I don't even know if they have that, but I would want to, I'd want to get off that contract so that you can possibly save this. Because if it does not work now, it's over. You're going to have to trade Booker, or you're going to have to trade Durant, and who say the other one don't want to go after you do that one. So I would have liked to see him move on from the Nurkic deal. I mean, what is he making? 18, and then Allen's making 15. He's a good player for him. I like Allen at 15. I just don't know if you couldn't turn that 30 something into, a little bit more of just a big center. If they would have went after Valanciunas, they would have had saved $8 million right there. I thought they could have done something with a Nurkic deal. I don't think he fits quite what they want to do. I think he kind of clogs the paint up a little bit for them. I do like the Little re-signing. Or did he re-sign? Yeah, I think he re-signed, didn't he? At a lower number. Yes. And then I like the Monty Morris, and I like Plumlee coming in too. Plumlee will give him some of those backup minutes. But, free agency's still young. I'd like to see him move on from the Nurkic deal and see if they can't add and make it to a little bit, a few more players rather than just having to pay their, a center who's pretty much a backup $18 million. If they could figure out a way to turn that into a couple more players and decide what their really intention in the long run for Beal is, I think they could turn it around. It's just a matter of figuring out whether they can, are they going to win? That's really the main question. And they're going to have pretty much, I think, till the deadline to figure that out. And if they don't, I think they'll be selling. I know James wants them to call the Rockets first to try to get those picks back. But I don't know that they wouldn't try to trade. I think they try to trade Durant and, then use a little bit of that to get off of the Beal contract and reload around Booker if I had my option.
Well, the problem with moving Beal is he's got a no trade clause. So it's got to be somewhere where he wants to go. And then you get into the problem of you're really trading him for peanuts because he's not going to want to go somewhere who's trading their best assets out for him. Not that I think he's worthy of a team's best assets at this point in his career personally anyways, but it's certainly like a tough spot to be in. I think the only way you get him to go is if it's a fire sale and it's just, hey, we've moved Booker, hopefully the Rockets. We've moved Booker. Durant we're shopping him right now. We have this deal on the table for you. Will you take it? And I think that's the way it's got to be done to get move Beal, or you're sitting with him for the rest of the contract because I don't think it's a seller's market when it comes to the Beal contract. And I think the peanuts that you were describing, I think it's like you're getting the shells just outside of the peanut that you have to like break off to get to the peanut. I think that's what you're getting for Beal.
Yeah, that's why I said you probably would have to get off of Durant deal and then add something with it. Send off a quality asset to get off the contract. But it's just too big of an albatross, and like you said, that no trade clause would make it even worse. Yeah, I don't think you get much more than peanut shells anyway.
Well, that's so much outgoing salary. Durant and Beal has got to be separate trades or a 3-team trade where they're going,
right,
out or one to A, one to B. Because I don't think that there's any team willing to throw back that much in a trade of anything good value. So next up, Filer, we're back to you for the next team that you want to talk about. Where's your head at here?
Yeah, the last team I wanted to bring up is Orlando, and they actually haven't done that much. They went and got Tristan da Silva, they lost Joe Ingles, and they got KCP. But really, what I'm so thrilled about is they've gotten so many of their guys back. I mean, Mo Wagner back on 2 years. They got the 5 year extension for Wagner for Franz, which was coming no matter what. Um, Jonathan Isaac back for 5 years, Gary Harris 2 years, Goga for 3 years. I just love that they're keeping this core together because they're already. I mean, I was just trying to let me see NBA standings real quick. They were the 5 seed in the East this last year with all these young guys, and they spent a lot of the season a lot closer to the top. I mean, they were never on the Boston level, but this is a really young core, and this is a really athletic, fun young group of guys. They have, they still have Anthony Black, who's improving, who I think has a lot of nice skills. You need the shot to come along, but he's got a lot of nice skills. And none of these are bad deals. I know people are not happy about the Franz deal, but that was always going to happen. He's young and really talented. But I mean, Isaac, 5 year, 84 million. That's just not that bad. Gary Harris, 2 years, 14. I love that. Goga, 3 year, 25. I mean, these are none of these deals are crippling. If one of them doesn't work out, it's kind of fine because there's still this isn't what the team is based around. It's based around Paolo and Franz and Suggs and all this young talent who's coming together, and they're keeping the guys that fit. So I just really like it. And if De Silva doesn't work out, who cares? There's so many of these guys who can contribute right now that we know can contribute, that they know can contribute right away. And it's just they're in a great spot to see where it goes from here. They're not locked into anything too bad.
I absolutely agree. They'll have flushed with cap space too. I know they're going to have a lot to do with the Apollo contract's obviously going to be a max, but they're going to have a lot of opening salary. They're going to have to figure out what they want to do with Wendell Carter at the 5. I think that he does a decent job, but I would like somebody a little more. I hate to say this, but flashy. I like Isaac down there, but he just can't play down there, 48 minutes, or even 30. So I just want somebody who's going to be a little bit more above the rim or play a little bit more above the rim. They do a great job playing with big guys out on the perimeter. So, let's have somebody that can kind of really man the paint. I thought they should have gone after Hartenstein, and they didn't. I love the KCP deal. I love the 22. That is amazing value, and you're absolutely right. Keeping all these guys and keeping this core together. They got Anthony on a decent deal. It's the long-term still set up, and they're going to have tons of cap space for the longer run. I think that punting off of we all said this was a bad draft and a bad free agents period. And then everybody's wondering why all these big names, why they're not, all these guys are just grabbing great role players and getting out of here. And I think Orlando did that. They jumped on KCP, got them early, and then just kind of re-signed their guys and set up their future for the long run. Yes, like you said, 5 seed, add some defense back there. Everybody's trying to defend Boston. There you go. There's the guy to do it. And, yes, I love the direction they're going, especially – they're not jumping out there again. Here's another young team coming up and not jumping out there and doing the crazy splashy thing. I think that's the new way to do it. OKC's doing it. The Rockets seem to be doing it. I know they're looking and shopping a little bit, but they seem to be smart and not just throwing out too much. So I think that's, Orlando's just following that same centerpiece, seeing how well these guys can mix and grow up together.
So I think 2 words that we brought up with New York also apply to Orlando: fun and gritty. I think both of those terms really apply to both those teams. And as someone who always enjoyed watching Western Conference basketball more growing up, I always thought, obviously, and they were more competitive this year as well. They probably will be next year. The East is getting really fun to watch. They have some teams that kind of have a solid direction. Now they also have a few teams in there have no idea what they're doing, and they're not so fun to watch. But some of these teams are really fun to watch in the East, and I'm happy that I'm going to be home a little bit earlier this year to watch some more East Coast basketball because I am excited. The Magic are a super fun team. I know Rockets Nation's going to hate me saying this, but Paolo is someone that's fun to watch. I'm sorry, he's exciting to watch. Should his 3-point shot continue to develop? Hopefully, like if it does, he's going to be really tough to stop. Franz is kind of a jack of all trades that does a lot of stuff really well. I think he's going to continue to grow that skill set, and I'm just a really big fan of what the Magic are doing. Ant Black was a guy that coming into the draft last year, I was really high on. I figured he was going to be a guy who takes a couple of years kind of to figure his footing and figure out ways to score because scoring volume is always a difficulty with him. He knows how to defend. He knows how to get other guys involved, but kind of taking that initiative and really pushing the issue himself is something he needs to still improve on. I'm not sure this is the roster to help him improve on that personally, but he's just going to be a good piece for them, I think. And then De Silva is in this draft, super smart player. Like Filer said, if he doesn't hit, it's not the end of the world. But I'm pretty confident he's going to be a hit. This draft wasn't a good draft from the top end perspective, but I thought teams did a really good job in this draft, better than I expected, at hitting pieces that made sense for them. I think a lot of teams kind of came at it with a similar mindset to kind of what we've been talking about, where you go out and you're not looking for the big upside swings in this draft because the chance, I'm not saying they're not there, but the chance they hit are so low. And the Magic did a great job, again, like you were saying, Gorman, not taking that home run swing, but just taking the nice step. Hey, this is the logical step that makes sense. And so that's why I was high on them too. I fully agree, Filer. Do you have something to say, Gorman?
Yeah, interesting note. I went to the Rockets and Orlando Magic opening day game last year in Orlando, and they really love Cole Anthony. Just all the people around me when he came into the game, all the people around me, I just noticed how excited they were to watch him play. You know, he's just like a spark plug off the bench. But like you said, keeping them together, I noticed that they are so big on a lot of those young guys like him, like Suggs and Black. They loved Black. All the people around me were just raving about Black's defense. I'm waiting for them to kind of insert him into that Ime did with Amen Thompson role, because he's got that similar bounce that can probably defend out there on the wing, but he didn't do that much this year. And I felt like they could have thrown him in there and seen what he was going to do a little bit more on the defensive end and just kind of hide him a little bit in the dunker spot. But he was kind of more on the ball. They're kind of pushing him to be more of the point guard, which, may be the long-term role, but at least kind of plug and play him somewhere and try him out on a young developing team. I thought they could have moved him around a little bit, but other than that, they're exciting. They're fun to watch, like you said. And when I was there, they do a good job in Orlando, really hyping you up. It was real. I enjoyed it. They blew us out, and I was a Rockets fan, but I really had a lot of fun at the game. And that's important. I think is to make sure you have a good crowd, happy base. When you have people that don't really like the team, they're not there. It can really set your franchise back for a long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting take with Ant Black, the Amen Thompson role. I don't know that I think he has quite the athleticism that Amen Thompson has needed to play that, because Amen Thompson's like a 99.9th percentile athlete. Ant Black is athletic. The role I kind of like for him is more of a Lonzo Ball role, where he's that connective passer. He can play probably three different spots for you defensively, and then if the shot comes along, like I think it will, because he was pretty good on just catch and shoot threes. Not good on dribble threes from what I remember, but pretty good on catch and shoot threes. So the Amen Thompson role is interesting, though. That dunker spot role is something I think he could thrive in. I've just never seen him do it, but yeah, I like that.
Well, when you have all those big guys that are out there on the perimeter, that opened up a lot of the inside of the paint. And, especially the way they like to play with that. He just didn't do a lot of cutting. He just sat back, like you said, a lot of catch and shoot stuff and a lot of off the dribble stuff. I felt like you probably could have utilized him a little bit more, at least cutting. Yeah, maybe not sitting in the dunker spot. all the time, but at least finding him there and then kind of make it a bit of a threat so that you can open up some of those outside passing lanes to hit those corner threes for the Suggses and Ingles of the world last year, and which is now going to be KCP. I just feel like, unless you have Isaac in there, there's not a lot of threat. Wendell Carter is more of a perimeter-y, jump shotty kind of guy, and I don't think there's a lot of inside threat when Isaac's out there, and I think that just kind of sticks all the guys out in the perimeter. And even if they're not, they're getting hands and faces of Franz, and that, his 3-point percentage dropped big time. I was actually surprised that they signed him to such a big deal, with that, because that's going to be his Achilles heel. If you're able to play off of Franz and play off Apollo, they crowd the paint, and you're going to be, they can't shoot their way through it. So I like Franz in the long run, but I think you need to surround him with a little more shooting. Suggs is getting better, but those are still not. He's not a above average shooter, and he's not a giant threat. So I would like to open the floor up for a little bit for him with Black in the dunker spot or something. So you got to do something with that, because they can get, if they end up having to shoot, they're going to have the same thing happen to them in Game 7 that happened to them last year. So.
That definitely makes sense. I think it's something they should look at. They should be exploring all possibilities with kind of all these players, because they have a lot of players, I think, that can play a lot of different spots. So, like I said, super fun team. Gorman, who's the next team you kind of want to touch on here as we're getting ready to end it?
I'm going to just touch on a couple of teams. I'm going to touch on the Golden State Warriors. I know that my Rockets family is going to hate me for this, but they're wide open. They kept all those young guys. They were able to keep Moody, Kuminga, and Pods. I know that they probably want Pods for the long term. They don't know really what they have in Moody, but that's still a trade piece for them. I like that they get some on-ball help with the Kyle Anderson signing. Bringing in Melton is going to provide some shooting along with the Heel deal. So, I mean, they're kind of back to being a lot of shooting around Steph. And if the question if they can defend, if they can come out and defend, which Draymond Green seems to get his teammates in line to defend, I think they set themselves up to, like I said, lateral moves in the West this year are pretty good. Not with any big names out there. Now they can go do it with letting Clay walk. They're a little bit younger. They're a little more athletic. I think that will help them. And like I said, they can defend. Let's see. Also had that they have a ton of cap space, and then they kept their picks all the way out other than the 31st. So they have plenty that they can package together, and then the cap space as well if they want to go out and get somebody to add to them. But other than that, they kind of have a lot of the pieces that you kind of want. They're a little bit deep. They can defend, and they can shoot it. So, here we go again with the old Warriors. Are they able to, get the most out of these guys with Kerr? I don't know, but I think I like what they are able to do is kind of keep it all together, see what they can do in the long run, maybe package something together and go get a big name to make a run. If not, then they can sell it off, and then they still have a viable path forward with those young guys. And then I wanted to just bring up and give a shout out to Utah. Nobody talks about them, but they're doing the same thing. Nobody wants to play in Utah. Marketing does, and that's a big deal. He only makes $18 million. They have plenty of cap space. They have plenty of draft picks. So they got a lot of decisions to make. But I like what they did with the ball dominant or the bigger group of guys that can handle it and shoot it with the Cody Williams draft pick and having the George on the team. There's just a few guys. They have a lot of guys that could hit. There's a lot of upside there. And, I'd re-sign Markkanen. I wouldn't try to trade him. I'd just try to re-sign him. And that's why I feel like Utah it's always a tough position, but I think they're doing the right thing, and I think Ainge is building something there that possibly could be sustainable, which is hard to say in Utah.
Well, looking at the Warriors first, I do like they brought in Hield. He's kind of like the we have Klay Thompson at home version of Klay Thompson. So that's a nice pickup to keep kind of that continuity going. Kyle Anderson's, I think, a really fun player with Steph Curry. His passing is, I don't think it's underrated at this point. Everyone knows he's a good passer, but just kind of that combination with Steph Curry constantly moving off ball. And I'm not saying run your offense through Kyle Anderson. That seems crazy. But as someone who can kind of keep things going while Draymond's on the bench offensively in that short roll kind of action, I really like Anderson. I don't know that's how they're going to play him, but that's certainly how I would at least experiment using him. Um, who else did they get? DeAnthony Melton is kind of maybe their next attempt at Gary Payton, the third, or yeah, Gary Payton again. Good gamble. I'm not super high on what they did. I think that the big discussion is as we get closer to the trade deadline, does Steph Curry want to end his career in Golden State? That's obviously a discussion to be had. I think all signs point to that he does. But, half a season of losing could change that as he looks towards the next few years and he's like, man, do I want to sit through more of this? So I think how they do in the first 2-3 months of the season is going to be really important.
James, I'll be crazy. Run your offense through Kyle Anderson. Let's do it. Kyle's one of my all-time favorite players. We were in college together at the same time. I got to see every one of his home games live. And I think he's been wildly underrated for a decade now. I do worry that last year is the first time I feel like I've started to see some fall off. Just physically, he's always been slow, but now it's getting over the top. But I always loved Kyle. He's one of my favorite all-time players. I'm thrilled for him to play with Curry because that's fantastic. Obviously, he's going to come in and be Draymond when Draymond's not on the court, to a lesser degree, obviously, but he does a lot of similar things. So I hope they do run their offense off. I hope they're running Curry and Buddy Hield around Kyle Anderson when Draymond's on the bench. I can't wait to see that. So that's a fun pickup. I don't know what's up with Melton. Melton's been such a good player for so long time, but he was injured a lot of last year, and so this has resulted in just a 1-year deal from Golden State. That seems crazy. He's only 26, but whatever's going on with his health is not great, obviously.
Right.
So hopefully for everybody involved, he's a really good player and he should be a good fit on this team. Hopefully he can be healthy this year. So I'm excited to see them. Utah is so interesting because I love their draft. It's a bunch of upside swings. I absolutely agree. It's, Collier. I love Cody Williams. It was a good draft for them. And then, Taylor Hendricks barely played last year. He was he's a sneaky good. He was a sneaky good prospect then, and he's still a good young prospect now. I know he came in and was pretty successful late in the year. So I'm excited to see him and Cody Williams terrorize second units on defense a little bit with just sheer overwhelming athleticism. But those are two good shots. I don't know what to do with Lowry. I'm from LA. I'm not used to watching a team who can't keep their stars. So it's hard for me to put myself in that same brain. So I when I see it, I think I guess they should trade Lowry like the Nets traded Mikal, get the most they can get. He's you got to think he's apex value right now. But if you can't get that, if you can't get apex value, and I'm not in the room with them, so I don't know, maybe they can't. I wouldn't mind them trading him and just getting apex, prime value and adding around all these young, talented guys. But if they can't, then he's a good young player, and what a fun team to keep building up.
Yeah, I really like that. They got one guy that's over 30 years old, and that's Jordan Clarkson, and he comes off next year. They just, they have a lot of flexibility. If they want to go sign a bunch of role players to fit around marketing and just kind of overpay, they can do that now. It's something that they haven't been able to do in the past, and now they have more flexibility, which I like. I like Utah. They're going to throw out a ton of young guys. They're going to be fun. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. But you're right, not a lot of Hendricks last year, so we still get to see him. And man, that's a lot of wings and there's a lot of length over there. And then they can learn a little bit from marketing. I think they hold on to him until the trade deadline at least. But like I said, I wouldn't get rid of him at all. I would sign him to he's deal friendly. You could probably get him on 35, get him on one of those friendly Harden deals that he just signed with the Clippers, and keep yourself wave flexible and hope that maybe somebody wants to come and team up there, because you can certainly do it there in Utah, and a bunch of young guys, athletic kids that can defend, and just see if you can't fit something around that kind of thing. So I really like that what they're able to start building there in Utah, which is a very difficult place to build, like you said. And, we didn't say much about Pods. He got a lot of on ball last year for Golden State. And I think, they're a young team. They got to learn. Kuminga got to learn last year. And, I mean, that's a big dude with a little bit of handle that can shoot it. And he was filling it up last year at one point for him. So if they can add some shooting around that kind of, they might be actually – and what, they were a play-in team. They barely made the play-in last year, and they got a little younger and they got a little more shooting. I think they can at least make a run at the play-in and try to run out Curry's legacy like Kobe. Just milk the team for all they got and barely just scrape the surface.
I can't believe I didn't bring up Pods. I was probably his biggest supporter behind his dad last offseason, man. He's a super fun player to watch. But looking at the Jazz, any really contending team, I think, that has the ability to go get Markkanen without severely hampering their future should be considering it. I think that he's obviously not the exact same player that Porzingis is. They have a lot of different aspects of their game that are unique, but he can make that same kind of impact where he's a big guy that's a mismatch for other teams guarding him out on the perimeter, and is just someone who I think has the competitive spirit to really go to a contender and compete right away. Like, I don't think there's going to be much time for him to mesh with teammates. He's someone that I think can come in and just work right away. So Markkanen is someone who, if I'm the Jazz, I'm not eager to move him, but if the right move comes along, I'm doing it. And if some team gets him for cheap, they're going to be very happy.
I mean, it's Ainge. What's something that you can't afford, getting him there? If he's getting rid of Gobert on 5, right? What was it, 5 or 6? Marketing is going to destroy the market. So, but like I said, I don't know that he's interested in moving on, and I think that Ainge better judge that, because if you move on from marketing, you better hope these guys hit. You're not going to get anybody in free agency, and you're going to be in the lottery. Maybe you can get a Cooper Flag or something along those lines for the next year. But other than that, you have to win through the draft, and that's why I'm a little bit higher on what they did this offseason by, just trying to stay with the young thing and pretty much just run it back with a bunch of young guys and let them learn. I think when they're needing to find out what there are, then you bring in the vets like the Rockets did. I don't think, running up these high-priced vets on these teams is exactly the smartest idea.
Well, if they really believe Cooper Flag is a generational prospect, honestly, they should be moving on from Markkanen, because no pick they're going to get in a Markkanen trade is going to lead to Cooper Flag, I don't think. I don't think any team's going to be willing to give up that pick for Markkanen, meaning the only chance they have is someone like Cooper Flag or Ace Bailey, let's say they think that's their guy, would be to tank this season. You can't tank from the trade deadline and get those guys. Markkanen's going to make them not so good they're going to make the playoffs, but he's going to make them too good to really have a good shot at one of those top guys, I think. So if that is, the path they want to take, they probably do need to move Markkanen. But this was a great conversation I think we had. This wraps up our way too early off-season review. Thank you, Gorman and Filer, for joining me. And again, y'all, please like the video. Just takes a second for you to hit the like button. Subscribe if you really like it. And if you want your friends to know how this offseason went, then share it out the video too. Thank you and have an excellent day.